Releasing in 2007, Command & Conquer 3 Tiberium Wars came out a full 8 years after the game which it followed, story-wise, Tiberian Sun. Generals was EA's first foray into Command & Conquer, but now we finally had their first attempt at doing justice to the legacy that they had bought. Could EA stick the landing, or is this the beginning of the fabled downfall of Command & Conquer? I'm Strategy Tom, and this is the classic review of Command & Conquer 3 Tiberium Wars. As usual, the Tiberium Wars storyline is weird and ridiculous, which is, obviously, one of its main strengths. By the time of Command & Conquer 3, the world has been split up into 3 different categories. The red zones are areas that have been completely overrun by Tiberium and are now inhospitable. Yellow zones contain the majority of Earth's population, and they are areas that have been affected by Tiberium. These areas are usually suffering, both economically and ecologically. The people living in them are usually poor and desperate. It is in these areas where the Nod presence is strongest. This leaves us with the GDI protected blue zones, areas that are completely untouched by Tiberium. They are rare spaces, and this makes them exclusive and affluent areas. This is something that I found really intriguing about Command & Conquer 3. In the previous 2 games, the 2 factions were presented with an obvious good guy, bad guy dynamic. GDI were the virtuous goodies fighting for freedom, Nod were the nefarious baddies. CNC 3 presents us with a much deeper shade of grey. GDI are now, obviously, on the side of the elites, and Nod can quite easily be seen as the defenders of the downtrodden. We meet our 2 factions with GDI feeling great about winning the previous war and feel untouchable. They believe that Kane is dead and Nod is fragmented, making them less of a threat. But we've all heard this story before, and wouldn't you know it, Kane's not quite as dead as everyone thought. What's more, GDI have made the blunder of hosting a conference on a space station. A space station that contains the majority of their senior leadership, without really thinking through how fallible their missile defense system really is. One infiltration later, a Nod have taken GDI's defense capabilities offline, before launching a missile right at the GDI space station, and boom, there goes GDI's top brass. The third Tiberium War has begun. One excellent thing about Command & Conquer 3 is the level to which it delves into the lore of this world. As you play through the game, you are presented with various objectives to complete. Some are primary objectives, some are secondary. As the name suggests, you don't have to complete the secondary objectives in order to complete the mission. But the completion of secondary objectives will grant you additional intel packages. These bits of intel are definitely something I'd recommend giving your time to, as they flesh out the backstory of not only CNC 3, but earlier titles too. It's an amazing little wrinkle that they didn't necessarily have to include, but I'm really happy that they did. In terms of the story, I was absolutely sucked into this game for about the first 2/3. The 2 campaigns run concurrently, meaning that once again, both campaigns are canonical. The story of GDI frantically scrambling to get a grip on the Nod advance that they had convinced themselves wasn't coming makes for a great story. The butting heads of GDI's remaining leadership is another wrinkle to this story that just makes it so incredible. Nod too has its own internal power struggles, and overall it is just an amazingly well told story. Then the screen appears. I might be alone in this, but for me, the story goes awry after the emergence of CNC 3's third faction. They do act as something of an explanation for Tiberium, however. The Skrin are an alien race who use Tiberium to terraform distant planets into a new home for themselves. They send out their meteors packed with Tiberium crystals, and then they wait around 100 years or so, letting the Tiberium do its work, and then they show up to a planet where Tiberium has completely taken over. Being made of a similar substance to Tiberium, this is perfect for them. They arrive and stay until they've used up every last bit of Tiberium, and then leave the planet, a barren husk, off to the next one. What they weren't expecting is for this planet's inhabitants to have begun harvesting the stuff, using it to fuel 3 world wars. So the Skrin show up and realise they're going to have to finish the job personally and begin systematically eradicating human population centres, GDI and Nod alike. The writers must have watched Independence Day or Starship Troopers recently or something, because the alien invasion story is not exactly original. I don't know why I dislike it so much, but I really got into this third Tiberium story and then it's all, oh, there's bloody aliens here now. I guess we need to put this fight on hold until we've solved this problem. It just feels like they're padding it out a bit. Once you've completed both the GDI and Nod campaigns, you unlock the option to play a Skrin campaign. It's not very long and it's not very good, but it's something, I guess. All in all, I just found the Skrin to be an unnecessary addition to the story. But I guess having 3 factions is the norm now, so sure, an alien invasion, why not? At least they don't have giant anime samurai mechs. We'll get to that next time. Command & Conquer 3 pivots back into a more traditional C&C game after the crazy experimental years of Generals. Build base, harvest Tiberium, etc, so on and so on. If you need an in-depth look at how these games play, well, I've got 5 other Command & Conquer reviews, all just sat there waiting for you to go watch. But what's different in C&C 3? Well, they brought forward the upgrades feature from Generals, which adds more diversity to the game and a much deeper sense of investment into your individual units. That being said, if you can secure enough Tiberium so that money is no issue, this can make you frightfully overpowered. 5 upgraded mammoth tanks are going to be nigh on impossible for any enemy to stop, particularly if you can easily replace any losses. The game also includes a massively expanded list of powers to call upon, be it reinforcements or off-map artillery bombardments. I'll admit this addition feels largely superfluous, as I found they cost too much to be really worth it. Perhaps a luxury to be used if you were flushed with cash, but not a game changer by any means. While base building returns to the traditional proximity-based mechanics, C&C 3 does include the ability to set up new building spaces outside of your main base and set up outposts across the map. So that feeling of controlling choke points and resources that I loved in Generals does return for C&C 3, and it's definitely to the game's credit. Command & Conquer 3 does an excellent job of mixing nostalgia with a new direction that C&C took in its post-EA age. The rosters of the different factions are diverse and interesting, with plenty of nods back to the Command & Conquers of old, with the expansion pack Kane's Wrath even bringing back the awesome walker mechs of Tiberium some fame. I also love the way they laid out the campaign, giving you the option to play different missions in the order of your choosing, which give you certain advantages depending on which you choose to do first. For example, if you choose to complete the mission where you take back an airfield from Nod, for the next couple of missions you will have increased air support. It's very much a callback to the older games, but unlike the older games, there are actually tangible benefits for choosing certain missions. All in all, I'm a big fan of Command & Conquer 3, and I think it plays very well. In the presentation of Command & Conquer 3, you can see where that big time EA budget went. There is a litany of famous talent that appears in the return of video briefings. From Battlestar Galactica, both Grace Park and Tricia Helfer. From House, there's Jennifer Morrison. And of course, there's everyone's favourite bad boy, Sawyer from Lost, Josh Holloway. Michael Ironside also appears, and he shows off his supreme acting range in Command & Conquer 3 when he plays General Jack Granger, who is, get this, a gruff, no-nonsense military man. I don't think he's ever played one of those before. Then there is acting GDI director Redmond Boyle, played by none other than Lando Calrissian himself, Mr. Billy D. Williams. Of course, the icing on this particular cake is the return of the Messiah himself, Joe Cutchin as Kane, a man who, like his character, seemingly does not age. If you watch my other videos, then you know how much I love the video briefings and how they use live action segments to tell the story. I think Command & Conquer 3 is only bested in this department by Red Alert 2. There is such a level of detail gone into the story and how it is told. The production values are fantastic, and to get such high profile names in just shows that they've really cared about making the story a key part of the game itself. Graphically, Command & Conquer 3 looks great, but that's not it. It's the overall design work itself. The levels are so unique and varied, with the difference between red, yellow and blue zones being stark contrasts of one another. The units are also excellently designed. Infantry are usually deployed in squads rather than individual units. This gives the battlefield a more crowded and frantic feel that I particularly enjoyed, while also adding to the character of each individual faction. Nod infantry are generally weaker in terms of their fighting ability and equipment, but as is Nod's strength, they outnumber their GDI counterparts. Strangely enough, Command & Conquer 3 is the only game in the series that does this, and I'm not sure why. In terms of the soundtrack, I've no real love for it, to be honest. None of it particularly stands out. It's very much like Tiberium Saga in that regard. Just kinda bland. But a bland soundtrack aside, Command & Conquer 3 looks and feels great to play. It is a refreshing take on the old Command & Conquer, and in my opinion successfully brought it into the 21st century. An incredible cast of characters bring an excellent story to life in a way that few other video games ever really manage. So, are we there yet? Are we at the downfall? Certainly not. Command & Conquer 3 is not perfect, but it is far from being bad. It's actually one of my favourites, and is certainly one that I will come back to replay every so often. So, how to rate it? The premise. The pros. The Tiberium Wars storyline continues in excellent fashion. The cons. The Skrin invasion feels a bit unnecessary and tacked on. The gameplay. The pros. Excellent unit variety and engaging variety to campaign missions. The cons. It is still lacking in any form of naval combat. The presentation. The pros. The cast and characters are superb. And Command & Conquer 3 represents another graphical leap forward. The cons. It's got a really bland soundtrack. Command & Conquer is a beloved franchise for a reason, and I'm afraid I do not share the opinion that everything post-EA acquisition is rubbish. Command & Conquer 3 is an excellent game across the board, which brought us back into the Tiberium Wars storyline with aplomb after 8 years of being on the bench. It isn't perfect, but it is yet another strong entry into this now legendary franchise, and for that reason I am giving Command & Conquer 3 Tiberium Wars an 8 out of 10. Thank you so much for watching. What did you think of Command & Conquer 3? Did you play it back in the day? What was your favourite appearance that made you go, is that blank from that show? Sound off in the comments below and tell me which game should get the classic review treatment in future. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe. I'm Strategy Tom, and I'll see you next time.